Good morning.
Good morning.
Before we get to the Dharma talk, I'd like to thank everyone who's been helping us, participating in this community in whatever way, either by just attending, studying together with the rest of the community, the Sangha, both off in the distance on Zoom and close up by walking in the right under the Torii gate there on the east side of the building, temple. So also want to ask for more help besides thanking you. And so I had something that's been written down for me to look at because my memory is undependable. The Buddha Hall fundraising to begin early next year, possibly around March after the month-long Ango practice, which I hope you will participate in, which is meditating all day for 28 days. If you can. And then if you're making end of the year contributions, you could consider our situation. We have architectural fees we're working on, trying to pay those, and also electrical upgrade needs to happen in the temple building that we're in right now. And also, I think I might have mentioned it here a few days ago, the tree removal was like to remove a tree that was threatening. You couldn't park back there because you didn't know if the tree would pick you out to fall on it. So we removed that tree, so that risk is gone. That was I think a couple $1,000s to do that. So if you can help us, please, and thank you. So this morning's Dharma talk, I'm going to look on here because I actually wrote down what I told Junshu when she asked me what it was. Oh, I can't seem to get that pin right. You ever have that trouble? No, just me. Where is it? It is projecting confusion. So projecting, I even had a note or two here, projecting causation. Who did that or caused that to happen? Thinking things, the projection part is thinking that things occur because of our interpretation of the situation. We think or conclude without really looking deeply into the experience beyond our thoughts about it, And you won't be able to do that if you try to think about going beyond your thoughts about it, because that the very nature of confusion is set up that way. You'll only be able to do it with a strong awareness practice. Do I know that for sure? I don't know anything for sure. And if you know something for sure, you're wrong. If you don't mind me helping you a little bit. Has anybody ever dropped their phone next to the sink where there's wet and then the phone yells at you, your phone is wet? You never had that happen? I haven't either. Do you think that's coming up with AI or something? It will tell you that it will tell you that the phone is no longer wet or something like that. Do you know about that? You guys are way behind. Only awareness sees beyond thought. Thought is trapped by thought. Thought loves thought. Thought will think about the thought that is rising as I'm being aware of my thoughts. Probably not. If you don't mind me helping. So what happens? Something shows up in our mind stream or whatever it is, and we step beyond that into some other situation and then invent things about it based on protecting our own self-centeredness, our own territory, our own ideas, our thoughts, our opinions, and so on. So it is about being aware of that, not so much changing it, because if you try to change it based on your thoughts about it, then again, that's the very nature of the confusion, is to try to use thought to fix or to change. So not that can't begin to occur in some way with someone who has really strong awareness training practice, someone who is is able to actually begin to lead with their awareness in any situation, whether it's at the wall or in the other room in your house with your partner, friends, neighbors, relatives, jumping to conclusions. We're so terrified or afraid of not knowing what's going to happen next. And what is that? What is the assumption there? That there is a next. There's no way you can believe what I said because you can't understand what I've said, because I don't understand what I've said in the sense of what I'm pointing at, to be able to come back through that and tell you again what I just said. That I leave that to attorneys. So to come back to the main idea here, the main emphasis on training your mind so that you or any of us, I could see better what is actually happening. The idea is get to the wall and go into that. Voluntary openness. You're volunteering to sit down and not know what this is. You're volunteering to sit down, sit symmetrical, and just watch what comes, what shows up, what turns sideways, goes this way, gets larger, gets more intense, starts to back off. Just observe that happen and see if you can see if there's anyone there that is observing that. See if you can see if there's anyone in there that has any say-so about what thoughts come up. Let me know how that goes. So it's a pretty simple statement about projecting, but it's going to show up differently with each person. You might even have trouble comparing notes about that kind of thing because it can be so different, show up so much differently because of the force of the content or how much passion, aggression and ignorance is attached to or trying to get some kind of territory in that area of your mind that is doing what? Grasping, rejecting, or ignoring, or destroying, anger. If I get up and have to leave, it's because I do not feel good. I don't think it's anything dangerous other than upset. So I'll do the best I can to continue. It might be good if you have some questions. That will keep me here a while. Yes.
Shoulder bowing. The area that comes up for me here is some difficult situation arises and I project like an ownership of who caused it. Like they did this or they're confused. Blame. How does that protect the self-centeredness?
Well, then there's you're reinforcing the whole duality. You're here, and so you're self-centered, which may look like just the truth. Is this I'm the only one that can see this the way it is, a form of sociopaths do. I mean, to use that category. Go ahead.
Shoulder bowing. It just looks so believable. It really looks like before that person came and did that thing, I was fine, and they caused me to feel bad.
Yes, you described it perfectly.
Is there a way to see that which is being triggered before someone comes and kicks that up?
The only way that I know of, I'm not saying that different people might have, just because of the way they're wired, might have a more of a leg up or an advantage, and just by being, say, very subjective, where they're already turning within quite a bit. But if they're turning it within with no mind training, then they're just reifying, reaffirming, validating, justifying their ideas, their opinions, their beliefs, and which protects them from what they are afraid of. Which, if you're protected from what you're afraid of, then you don't really know what it was that was even causing the fear, because you're shut off from it. So the idea there, as far as what you're asking about is you already know what I'm about to say. Train that which observes, and sit down, hold still, and become as strong an observer as you can. If you want to use a kind of a very relative way of saying it, nothing becomes stronger. It's already the case. You're just uncovering the awareness that you've been covering up with your thoughts, opinions, ideas, judgments, and so on. And you've stopped doing that because you are asked to observe. Well, if you observe the thoughts, ideas, opinions, judgments, and so on, you begin to see that they can't maintain their status as an opinion about that unless you're adding to it. Because if it's just that, if you just see you're bullshitting yourself, you don't do anything with it, you don't fix it, you don't outflow, you don't blame anyone. You could say you're being responsible for it, but there's no one to even be responsible. I would call it more like just you're sincere about this. You want to know what this is. You're done lying to yourself. You're done believing anything that anybody's doing or saying. You need to see it. You don't need somebody to come up and explain and justify it, validate it, push it on you.
Shadow bowing. In a certain sense, it seems easier to receive that difficulty on the cushion because if it comes up, I don't have to do anything but sit there. So when that intensity comes up and I still need to talk to somebody or work relatively with somebody, it's like that negativity prevents or just completely takes the energy out of what I'm trying to do. How do we continue to function when that negativity is so intense?
So you're just to make sure what you're asking me, I'm going to tell you what I think you're asking me, and you agree or disagree or say it again. It looks like you're asking me to give you some kind of a technique or attitude or teaching that will help you work with that in such a way to shut it down and turn it away or turn it off. Is that what you're asking me?
If it was, I want to re-ask it a different way.
Go ahead. I don't want to answer the wrong question.
What is it to keep functioning in the midst of our negativity?
Be aware. Go ahead. There's a question right after that.
Sure.
How do I? Yes, go ahead.
It's a little different.
Oh, it is. So it's not the right question.
Is what looks like shutting down still functioning?
I would have to say yes, because you're just watching. It's as if you put anything on top of that. And so you're no longer aware that you're shutting down, but now you have a reason for shutting down. Or you have a more clear description of what the shutting down actually is. You've actually left the shutting down for thoughts and ideas about it. You can't stop doing that, but you can observe it so that it just because thoughts are self-existing, there is no thinker behind them. And in that way, things can cool off. But I can give you a recommendation that I recently gave someone. I know who it is, but I'm not going to say their name. To alternate between the sense fields. If you're in a situation where it's your everyday at the kitchen table anxiety or interacting with a neighbor or someone, and that's kind of coming up, and there's a tendency to want to blame, but you have some insight there that there's just an awful lot of anger going on or discomfort here going on for what just occurred. The little trigger that walked by or showed up and said, da, 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 da. They walk away and suddenly you're upset. Is that what you're referring to? Go to the sense fields. There's 5 things, probably more, but there's 5 things that we know of that are on receive, that are not thinking. Sight, smell, taste, touch. What's that other one?
Hearing.
But why did you use a visual? Oh, American Sign Language. Is that what it was? It would be this.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, we don't want to get derailed too far here. So do you follow the understanding behind that you're still on receive? It's just that you're not receiving. You're not just totally focused on the thoughts that are coming or they're bouncing around in your mind because of this trigger, because of the apparent causation that was not a causation. It was just a part of dependent origination that shows up to remind you that you have a whole junkyard that you're ignoring. I'm about to show it to you because of this person held up a piece of junk and walked by. Suddenly all the junk that you've been hiding out from shows up. And what are you going to do? Blame the person that just tried to teach you something. Everything is your teacher. The teacher is here just to kick you, perhaps, or encourage you, perhaps, or smile at you, or run away from you, or ignore you. They might take any direction at all. And they, if they're a true teacher, will have no idea why they're doing what they're doing. If they have some kind of figure it out, or then we're back into the psychology and philosophy and that stuff. And that may be the only way you can work with it. It's not that that's wrong. It's just doesn't as quite as far reaching as awareness. Go ahead.
Shadow bowing is part of the difficulty with that trigger. Like a negative thing shows up. It's part of that difficulty that I'm forgetting my other senses. I'm just becoming fixated.
Ignoring, fastened on what's happening instead of listening, receiving what's happening, but receiving the sound of the air purifier, receiving motions that happen. I'm looking at you, but I'm seeing everything in here, not focused on it, but I know who's here. If someone, I'm not saying I would always, it's like I've got this great memory for anything. Where is the memory machine, by the way? Not feeling well. Speaking of Sokuzan, yes, sir.
Maybe bowing. I'm paraphrasing, but a little bit earlier you said something. Let's see if there's any personality to the observer. See if
Yes.
you can see any. If there's, and to me, it feels like it always feels like there is something attached to that, or there is some sort of aspect of self that feels like it's observing.
Yes, that's ego. The actual observer, if you're actually receiving, you won't know it. And I mean that, what I just said. But you can take it a different direction and see if we can deconstruct what I just said.
So is it just looking at that feeling that there is someone or observing?
Is it observing?
Or is that what I should be looking at?
What did you describe? Say what you described. Was it your perception?
It seems like the personality.
That's what you should be looking at. We're not looking for the truth. We're looking for the lie. In order to see, we have to look. This is what the Buddha saw. Illusion, that was his awakening. He saw that everything, everywhere, was unreal. That doesn't mean it wasn't right there. That's why it's so convincing, because nerve endings come together. Sound, smell, taste, touch, hearing, thinking come together and affirm that, which is the teaching of the five skandhas. That's what that teaching is about, breaking down the consciousness, the perceiver, the perception, the whole mechanism in such a way that you can see it, so you can see there's no person in there, through using a conceptual description of it more.
So does that feeling of a personality behind the observation go away?
No, and why would it? It's just an illusion. It doesn't have to go away. It's actually quite enjoyable once you see what it is. And you may, if you don't track this, what I'm saying, then ask some questions about it, because it may be quite enjoyable, even entertaining to see how confused your mind is. And it's unreal. You don't have to get rid of it. You do not have to get rid of negative feelings or thoughts. It's beyond. They actually transcend that, because it is unreal. So therefore, some of it may disintegrate and come apart. You may never be really irritated at anything that used to make you very impatient, and then you kind of enjoy the impatience, because you know there is no fault anywhere, no blame anywhere. Even though there you could say, well, in the waiting room, the doctor, overbooked, and suddenly, we've got 15 people in there instead of 9. So that kind of thing. You actually begin to see the humor in the whole thing. It doesn't mean you are going to break up laughing, but you just see that it's odd the way we've always jumped at things and clamped down, and it's right, it's wrong, and try to explain and try to blame ourselves or blame others. Then, oh no, it's me, it's all me. I'm the one that can't get it straight. So this is why the teaching is saying, just observe. Just observe. When you get up from the wall and go down the hallway or to the living room, the porch, go out to feed the cats, just observe. If you are just observing, I often say, you won't know that you're observing. But that is a way of pointing at something that's even harder to to understand if I say it a different way. I would say there is observing, but there's no observer. So the observing could become more intense because it is no longer worried about open space. It's no longer worried about making sure there's some kind of follow-up that says, yes, you are seeing correctly, or you're just observing. More?
See, bowing, if you are seeing, and you have that comical, like lightness,
Mm-hmm.
is that still attaching to the self because there's some part that is,
Humor?
yeah,
No. I'm not saying that, of course, that couldn't happen, but that was going to show up along that, not the same thing, but sometimes people try to be funny. They actually use humor to protect themselves. I recently had a neurologist do that. Rather than help the patient, there was more about projecting themselves. So I would say the way you're asking me the question, I would say, not that we don't want to set up a standard about that. So there might be times when that could show up, but there would be some kind of differentiation going on there that may not be all that obvious, other than it's almost like you just kind of sense there's something fishy about this humor, either out there or in yourself, that you can actually, because of your sitting practice of meditation, your awareness, prioritizing the awareness over what arises in it, the awareness starts to get, it's like a really, the room that you're in is very clear, other than the objects that are coming and going. Whereas in the person who has no mind training, or is clogged up with their belief in their right and wrong and so on like that person, the atmosphere in the room is it's like it's full of smoke. You can't really see clearly what it is. So I'm not sure if I wandered around too much in responding, but I would say it probably happens in both ways, depending on lots of other differentiation that you might not be able to track down because it's too much of it.
Kelsey back. So if the like analogy of there being smoke in the room,
Yes.
if you're seeing someone else respond from their ego in a strong way,
Yeah.
That is awareness, right? Because you're seeing clearly, but then it almost feels sometimes like it feeds something in my own ego of seeing their confusion.
Yes.
I don't know what my question is.
Well, that's far enough. I can respond to that. How was that? That's what I'm saying is don't go any further with it. It's just, you just saw it. So it gets suspicious if you try to validate or reify and say this was actual seeing awareness, seeing this, or seeing the humor, or seeing the smoke, or seeing anytime there's a second opinion or a validation of it. Relative truth needs that. We need to have that. Otherwise we can't, the cars won't run, and we can't figure out what's happening with the electronics or our health. Even that's really confusing. And that's just dependently risen in terms of physical situation, what is being ignored there. And I have no knowledge about medicine particularly, but they're ignoring the consciousness, and they're making assumptions about consciousness, the food digestion and body temperature and all that. I think that's all just automatic. And there's nothing automatic. So further questions? Yes, sir.
So bowing. If we see that the negativity that's showing up is an illusion, can that still be triggered, still be difficult?
Yes, because seeing that it's an illusion, you might be talking to yourself about it. So to actually see that it is unreal, that is an illusion, you won't have to maintain that. Whereas you see it's an illusion, you feel that that's giving some protection or some insight. You're making some progress. The very nature of spiritual materialism is to think you're getting somewhere. So I'll do anything with it. I'll maintain it. I sometimes say, if that's interesting or if that's valuable, just return to it. Shouldn't be hard to find. Unless there's a lot of laminations around it of thoughts and ideas, judgments, validations of what you've just been seeing. When I say you won't know it, it's not that there won't be a knowing, but there's no personhood that is getting a credential or cashing their check at the end of the week. We're doing such a good job of being a separate being.
Go to the mailing. It looks like I have the story, or just to talk about it that way, that something comes up and I outflow and yell at somebody or get angry.
You yell,
Yes. And
yell. Yeah, so, go ahead.
the story that comes up is, if I would have seen that more clearly, that wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, I hear you. What?
Is that a misunderstanding?
Well, you know, we can't overuse that word misunderstanding, because it looks like we have to fix something or correct something. And I do use that as a misunderstanding, but when there's a tight grasping, locking down on something, then I might say that might be a misunderstanding there. But it's about seeing that, not stop doing that, start seeing the truth, and that kind of elaborate. So what is it you want to know? Let's work on that one.
Because the bowing is a path, just decades of outflowing and watching it.
Maybe not decades, maybe months and years. Let's see who's not laughing. More. You know,
You don't know.
I was trying to remember what her name is. I'm not kidding. I don't kid.
You were talking about the whole junkyard that gets triggered.
Yes,
Excuse me. So
you're excused.
if we have a whole junkyard,
Yes.
because we're older, so we have lots of junk
You're older.
accumulated. And
You're older? No,
not
I'm
older
old.
than you.
Well, not older than me. I just want to make sure that you weren't forgetting the numbers. Go ahead.
So then we're not triggered by anything if we're alone in solitary retreat or something, just the junk that's already there. Is it important to get new junk? New trigger?
Straighten up. Pardon me while I take some drugs. I don't know. So what is it you want to know? Is it important to, I mean, do we need to have stuff that we can continue to work on to see if is it an illusion, that kind of thing?
You know, yes, or is it just pawing through your old junk enough of it?
So this, and this is my understanding of it from practicing it, not talk to a scholar, they might say, oh, no, that's incorrect. Or if you talk to a lama, they might say it's incorrect. But my understanding of creation, completion, or tantric practices, the actual deity yoga practices, are creating something and then seeing it's unreal. Creating something, see it's unreal. Instead of just trying to work on how much you hate the neighbor because they keep piling old junk cars. Old junk cars in the side yard, and we have to keep the windows closed because it's irritating to look at. So that kind of relative situation, that's kind of what the idea is there, is to, but you can do it. You don't really need a tantric practice or a deity yoga. I mean, you might. If you do, then there's ways to work with it that way. But just watch the very things that arise in your mind and see that they're unreal. And how do you do that? You don't push them away. It's almost like you pretend they're unreal. You don't push them away. You don't believe them, grasp them, and you don't turn away or pretend that they don't mean anything. They're not important. Everything is important. And this teaching is something that you've probably heard before. I certainly didn't invent it. That everything, there's no sacred and profane from the point of view of the Buddha's Dharma. It's just sacred. Everything is completely, fundamentally, ultimately, totally sacred. And it's not the kind you could total up, even though we say totally. Because everything is sacred, 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 everything. Your pain, your pleasure, your indifference, sacred, sacred. What do we mean by sacred? I don't know, look it up. You tell me what it is and I'll tell you if I agree with it. You don't have to look it up. Is there a further question?
How do we tell the difference between what seems like negativity coming our way and our projection of our own confusion on that situation.
What's the question?
Question is, how do we tell the difference between
So,
the negativity coming towards us and the projection?
so don't look for differences, because that will take you right in the trap of thinking around and around and figure it out. I gotta figure this out. Doesn't it sound sincere? Phew, I gotta figure this out. And if you were sitting next to the person, you might align with them and say, yeah, you do. You better be thinking about that, or figuring something out, or get an attorney or something. So what am I saying? Don't differentiate, just look at it. If it looks positive, negative, neutral, no matter what it does, just receive. Your only job, J-O-B, is to just receive what shows up if you're sitting on the cushion. Just receive it, no matter how much it smells, no matter how much it is irritating, or no matter how magnetizing it may be. And I think I'm onto something. Just observe that feeling. Don't get rid of it. Don't validate it. Don't. It's very much a negative way of working with it, because the ego mind, the illusion, is so extremely positive. And how does it keep that positivity going? By reinforcing polarity, duality, good and evil, right and wrong, back and forth, correct and incorrect, intelligent, not intelligent, beautiful and homely, all of those polarities.
Different question. You said become as strong an observer as you can.
Yes,
Does that mean just showing up on the cushion?
a little bit more, I would say. The way I teach it, it's taught different ways. I say, get to the cushion, sit down, hold still, and watch what continues to keep moving. You've brought everything to stillness. You may not be maintaining it with some kind of a vice grip or something, but you're just sitting here. You're relaxed. Sometimes it's even good to raise up a little bit and just kind of settle down into it, and then just observe. And notice when something shows up, how by watching what it moves, see if there's something coming from a part of consciousness that doesn't want that. It won't really look like an ego. It's not going to look, you're not going to get that lucky that soon, maybe in 10, 15 years or longer. I'm very, very slow at understanding or learning anything. I'm lucky to have gotten a high school diploma, because they had preconceptions about intelligence. The downside of that was very difficult years, the first 32, 33 years, very difficult. The upside of that is I'm not concerned about that anymore. Yes, sir.
I'm looking at the title of projecting confusion, and sometimes you say that the Buddha awoke to confusion or delusion. Was that a projection of confusion?
Initially, it probably was. It's this and that. I'm feeling this way, and I don't know why, or I'm feeling this way, and it's because of what I'm doing or not doing, or I'm feeling this way, and it's because of you. So increasing that. So he saw the confusion. And he saw the duality of that. There's no self, empty of self, empty of other, which might take a little longer. Could come at the same time. Chisho, you have a question?
Kishwaling. You say that when we receive, you won't know that we are receiving, or we won't know what is received. Isn't receiving also a mental process or a process in the mind stream?
Initially, yes, it is. It's a process. It's accessible. We can deliberately look at the color of this card and see the lines on it. We can receive the blueness of those lines. We can look out and see. But you're quite often, as soon as you tune into the fundamental situation, which is a color, you go beyond that into who did that, who wrote that. And so when we look at a person, we immediately go to our idea about the person, because you can't really deeply see into anyone's consciousness unless you've looked into the consciousness that is appears to be over here. If you've done that, then you're pretty much tongue-tied the rest of your life, unless you have students. As long as there's a student and there's someone who sees, you won't be able to help but teach. So more about that, Chisho, if you have it.
Kishawang. So is receiving a different type of mental process that is not the usual thinking process? But
A way of saying it would be the thinking might still be there. It might be wall hangings right next to that particular doorway. Could be any number of thoughts about it, but it's not interfering with it. It's very complementary. It's like the awareness is in the lead. The awareness is leading. And the thinking process that might be one outstanding dancer, but it's a very bad partner if it tries to do it, just usurp and make the consciousness do what you're thinking about. But if you dance with the awareness, and how does that feel? Like you don't know what you're doing, where you're going, and whose ideas are those? Ego, self-centeredness. Consciousness is everywhere. There's consciousness. You can't look anywhere that you don't see yourself, who you fundamentally are. Of course, this body-mind complex and all of your conditioning and all of your ideas protect you from that. And that's why most people can live in society just going to war, going to peace. Going to peace for a while, and then war. Politics are pretty good for 3-4 years, and then they start to go back the other direction because something is being shut down all over the place. More about that, Chisho. So to go a little further, that thinking area there, like I was using the image of consciousness is just an open door, awareness. And I was talking about wall hangings on the doorway that you're going through. Just I'm very visual, so I tend to see things. If I want to talk about something, I see pictures of it rather than words or concepts. I could go into that somewhat, but I would probably need to get some scholarly help somewhere. It was hard enough to write the 3 tenets without help.
Who are we fundamentally?
Not separate. It's an incredible illusion that we're all over the place, spread all, have our different ideas, identities, our boundaries, our this and that and this and that. But the fundamental nature, and if you see what it is, that doesn't mean you have access to everybody's wall safe because we're not separate. No, the not separation means that you no longer need anything. Everything, everywhere you look, this is yours. I mean, it's not yours that you can move it, but if you see an oak tree and it's yours, you don't necessarily rip it up and pull it over here just because you can. Although people do that, they're called gardeners. I was thinking about the story you told last night. Oh my goodness. I wish there was time. I'd have you come up here and tell the story. You need to write that down somewhere and get it published. And then, yeah, and I'll pay for the publishing.
Okay.
Shouldn't be more than about 28 pages.
It's already published.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I didn't have a hand in it. It is. It's in was it New York Times?
The New Yorker.
The New Yorker, yeah. It's a great article in the New Yorker. What would I call it?
Where Trump wants to be buried.
Where the former president wants to be buried. Only use his name. And Andy's in there, aren't you, Andy?
Yes.
Yep. They're telling all the crazy things he did. You wouldn't think he seems like such a conservative fellow. But he's not. He's outlandish, outrageous. Are there further questions? Yes, sir.
Neil Kabowing, questions from YouTube. Person, human, play on human person.
Human.
Does language alone create the sense of duality, and do the concepts of real and unreal only exist as useful ideas, but do not really exist?
That's an awful lot there. So let's start with the first one. Read the first question.
Does language alone create the sense of duality?
No.
Do the concepts real and unreal only exist as useful ideas?
Okay, you can do that. There's a lot more to it than that. That's what you are endeavoring to do there. Who is it that's asking?
Person, human, I could maybe ask if
person?
they're real.
Well, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So, but if you just say is it this way or this way, or is it this way? Then it's easier for me to just respond and say, yeah, you have a point. But it doesn't go far enough because it just reifies and reestablishes the one who is making such a comment. It's about the question, not about what you're looking for. I'm not accusing you of anything, Milka. I realize that he read that. Further questions? Any questions on Zoom? We have a few minutes. If you have them, if you don't, then there's other things. Go ahead. Show bowing. Oh, yeah, stand up. Oh, go ahead.
It looks like when intense emotions come up that they kind of spin around and create a separation between
Yes.
me and other stuff. And I'm thinking of a practice like thank you very much. I have no complaints whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
Does that help us to break through that or stop how does that help us with that spinning, doing something that the ego doesn't want to do like that?
It just adds more texture to the whole thing. That's what you're doing when you're doing sitting meditation for sure, but also coming in and doing some kind of form in here, like the book study forms, not just the people studying, but the facilitator also is putting a little bit of friction between what is being said, what is being heard. More? You understand what you asked me? Do you understand it by what you asked or what I said?
A little though.
Uh-oh. He's on to me. Yes. Further, Sokuzan, did you have a question? Was you just waving at me or?
Sokuzan bowing. You hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. How is it that language does not cause a sense of separation? If I heard that correctly, bowing.
The language that arises is just self-existing. It just shows up and it works. If you ask me a question, which you just did, I'm just hearing what I'm saying. I'm not thinking about it. So it's the language is part of the form that shows up as sound. We convert the different shapes of different sounds have meanings attribution there, and a good way to get a good feeling for how much differentiation there is in languages. Just look at what say Mandarin characters mean relative to what the way our way of working with words. It's just a different way of working with that. So it's not to say that going in the area you seem to be going is that isn't a strong structure the ego makes use of. We'll use the ideas, the opinions, the explanations, the judgments, and so on. This is one of the reasons, if we can, we try if we're studying a traditional text like Dogen or like the 30 verses of Vasubandhu, which is one is a very good example. I think the 11 translations we have access to. We don't necessarily look at everyone every time, but sometimes if an area starts to get kind of strange because of the translation it doesn't seem to be too accessible, then we might look at other translations and see if we can't get some idea of what the intention is. More, Sokuzan?
No, thank you. Bowing.
Okay. Yes.
You're bowing.
Yes.
Can the projection of confusion be the projection of wisdom?
Well, it might be the projection of the idea of it, but wisdom can't be projected because there isn't anything there to do something. This is why the non-doing part of training the mind, sit down, hold still, and just do nothing. You're not really doing anything. Even when I say just observe, that shows up as an identity who's observing for a while, but eventually it just wears out and you're just kind of hanging out. So wisdom is a word that to describe something that consciousness in the form of a human being, the Buddha and sages down through the centuries have understood by listening to the words of that sage, that enlightened one, and endeavoring to train your mind to see what they were pointing at.
There's a teaching or a saying that you bring up sometimes, the Dharma is good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end. How is it good in the middle when it's so painful?
Well, that teaching, as I understand it, I don't know where it comes from. Does anyone here know the source of that teaching? It's buried back there somewhere, but it's pretty good. In that what it's basically is saying that the progression has gone out of it. You have to realize it though, because if you don't realize it, then you'll think there was a time when you were confused, a time when you were practicing, and then a time when you were awake or enlightened. And that's untrue. Sounds good though, doesn't it? So good in the middle, good in the middle, good at the beginning, good at the beginning, good in the middle, good at the end. It's just saying that when you see what the Dharma is, because the nature of the Buddha's Dharma, nothing is separate. So everything you've been through is totally valid. It's validated because you see it couldn't have been any other way. And it's not that it couldn't have been any other way, but listen to this, but it could not have been any other way. You hear what I'm pointing at by saying two things at the same time and separating one from the other by saying it couldn't have been any other way. But now listen to this. Hear me? See how I'm doing that? It couldn't have been done any other way. This is the same thing twice. Or did I? Why did you hear it one way one time and the another way another time? When I say why, turn that into a what questions immediately so that you don't search for answers. It has to be seen. In your thought, in your mind, it's like your thought process just backs away. It's there. It's wall hangings. You can read them if you want to. They're there, but they're not yelling at you. It's not like you have whatever happened to those microphones that used to stand up here? Oh, is this the microphone now? Further? Question? Bobby? Michelle? Come on, Michelle. Once every 32 days.
Okay.
I scared her. Michelle's going to ask a question, guys. Hurry, get to the kitchen, get back. Go ahead.
Michelle Bowling. When you were talking, I noticed that it started snowing outside. And my awareness went to the snow instead of what you were saying. Is that ignoring what you're saying?
It's situational. We can't totally be fastened on everything. I don't deliberately try to fasten on it. If I do anything, I'm overwhelmed by what I'm seeing all the time. If you see me listening to someone's question, you'll notice that you might think my mind is wandering, but I just look at everyone. Why wouldn't I? Everyone's here. Everyone is listening. I'm about to address this person's question, but I'm about to address everyone. So I need to know who's here. When I say who's here, I'm not saying I look at Milka and think, oh, see, he's onto the snow out there, but in a minute he'll be back. And yeah, he's doing the same thing Michelle's doing, being distracted by the snow, not listening. Now, if someone comes in here and is on their cell phone the whole time, I'm probably going to say something about, like, please go out, take your cell phone outside, rather than. Pinar, how are you doing? You have a question? Can't hear. Inyar? Can't hear you. Oh, voice, is it on his end, do you think? Well, the Denso gene says it's your problem. You got a thumbs up. So you can type it in. If it's fairly short, you could type it in and someone could read it. Do that. Okay, very good. Is there another question on Zoom while we're here? Out here, and yes, sir.
Milka bowing. The gentleman gave us his name, Dave in Suffolk in England, asked the question earlier.
Hey, Dave.
Um,
Thank you. Other question? Yes, sir.
Bowing
It's full of questions today. Thank you.
is difficulty an indication that we're not seeing something clearly?
Well, it could be. It would be very, very complicated. So the difficulty could be the kind of difficulty that you're going to have when you start looking at something you've been able to cover up for 30 years. You've been able to hide out from, and suddenly the causes and conditions align with facing the wall, studying the Dharma, having difficulty with who? Andre? I mean, anybody. Having difficulty with me. Or with relationship stuff or anything that shows up. It might need to come up, but you don't need to go in and analyze that, because then what does that do? That hooks us right up to the merry-go-round or the tilt-a-whirl or the Ferris wheel rotation, right and wrong, right and wrong. She said, he said, and it just puts us in there. It's not that doesn't have a relativity that is pretty tasty to the ego, because it looks like you're not to blame for how you're feeling. Somebody else is. All I have to do is get rid of them. If that goes to extreme, then we have psychopath, or we have someone is so insanely projecting on someone else how they're feeling it, they're willing to actually take their life with the idea that that will somehow stop the thing, and other people just get divorces. All of it is a misunderstanding, every single bit of it. And when I say, how do you correct the misunderstanding? You can't. There's nothing to correct. It's just the misunderstanding is misunderstanding what you're looking at and thinking that you have some say-so about it. You don't. But it's interesting that if you see that you don't have any say-so about anything, you stop meddling with everything based on your own passion, aggression, ignorance, hope, and fear, pride, jealousy. If you're acting out of those energies, it just makes things more confusing, not only for others, but for yourself. You don't have to do that. You could actually just do what? First noble truth, suffer. Because if you're suffering and you try to go to why, I'm not saying you shouldn't take Tylenol like I just did for how I'm feeling. I did. So I'm not saying you shouldn't simply operate in the relative world that we're in. It's the demand part that makes it so difficult. So if we just know that this situation is, this person is being disagreeable, we could actually consider that they have a part to play in this whole charade, this whole game or stage play. Give somebody else the benefit of the doubt. This is part of the spiritual path in the Mahayana Buddhism, is put others before yourself. And part of that practice is seeing, here it is, seeing how you can't quite do that. So that's when you begin to see that and you do it anyway, you just continue to return to that vow, the vow that transcends everything. It's even been said, the vow that transcends karma, transcends cause and effect, because it doesn't join it, it doesn't react to it, and it doesn't ignore it. This is the spiritual path as I understand it. If you understand it differently, then go find some students. Come up here, set. Let you hold for us. Is there a final or kind of almost final, temporary final? Just go ahead.
Bowing, that sentence, I can't remember what it was that you repeated twice, and you said you hear it one way and then you hear it the other.
Wasn't that fun?
What is that showing us?
showing how smart I am. It's just what I was trying to say as going back, I can't remember exactly what was showing, but I just noticed that no matter what you say, you say it, and then if you say it again, it sounds like the same thing, but there's something different about that. Not just one is a copy or facsimile, is it called a facsimile or something, but there's something different. There is no now and then. You begin to get to the illusion. Poets work on this all the time. You can read poetry. Chokodawa sent me a reading from the playwright Samuel Beckett, so wrote something that I apparently gave to him or loaned to him years and years ago. He sent me this. It's a great reading from Beckett. There's a poem by him, but there's a word repetition that he was doing over and over, and you would read it, and you'd slowly sink away from what the words meant into the sound of it. And if you read the poem, actually, Chokodawa was reading it to me, and or on a recording. But you could feel what he was doing with that, with the language, taking you away from the conventional meaning of that into a deeper space around the sounds, very much like music. But when you're doing it with words, like a poet like E. Cummings or Pablo Neruda, Gregory Corso, etc. Bob Holman is also, I don't know if Bob's here today, but he's a great poet if you have a chance to read any of his work.
Dinyar has a question. How can I understand that everything is sacred and that everything is an illusion?
First, you have to see that it's an illusion, and you have to see that the whole idea of sacred and profane, or correct and incorrect, right and wrong, me and the other guys, that's the illusion. And you can do that by spending a lot of time looking at the illusion maker, which is this. There's no one here. It's just dependent origination. There's an assumed identity because you're not having your thoughts and you're not having my thoughts. I'm having my thoughts. So the feeling of identity just kind of goes with the territory of being a living being with the six sense fields and their objects, moving through the six realms. So it's like that. That's a description of a human being. Technical out of Buddhist provisional teachings is when the five skandhas move into the six realms, this is called a living being. It's an interesting way because the way the five skandhas work and the particular state of mind or atmosphere or location of those five skandhas will give you an idea of what's going on there. If they're in hell, it's going to be difficult. If they're in heaven, it's not going to be so difficult, but it'll be closing off because you believe that you've arrived, and then so on and so forth.
Devon, we cannot see things are sacred until we see illusion.
You have to see that what you're thinking about and projecting onto is unreal. It has to be some of that. It seems. I'm not saying it couldn't happen in a way that I haven't seen or don't understand or I'm not clear on. It's possible. Maybe. Have you noticed how you even identical twins talk to them sometimes? They're not identical. And it's like they begin differentiating themselves as soon as they realize how much they look like the other one. Try to dress different. And then there's other twins that really enjoy that, and they just dressed in the same clothes until they're in their 80s. Odo, you have anything? You're sitting here, you must have thought of something.
Well, I was thinking about how you talk about being aware. So during sitting practice, you have thoughts that arise, and when I become aware of them, that tends to kill them. It tends to stop them.
Yes.
And then tends to be an evaluation and judgment.
Yes.
Emotions aren't quite that way, but it seems odd that there's that awareness ends them like that. You know, when your instruction, it feels more like you're saying, be aware of the thoughts while they're happening. But my experience is, as soon as I'm aware of thoughts, they stop happening.
So just have a question about it.
Well, the question is, when you say, when you say be aware like that, is that your understanding that thoughts will stop?
No. If something stops, if you want to use that term, it would be more like what stopped is the grasping at that, rejecting of it, or the shutting down of it. The passion, aggression, ignorance tend to lose their ownership in that area. The thoughts are still coming, and that's when you begin to see that there's no thinker, that the thoughts are dependently risen. They never did belong to you. You realize that all of your thoughts, my thoughts right now, my statements, anything I'm saying here, any teaching I'm giving is not coming from a separate being. It's also not like coming from the Buddha or something like that. It's just coming from a dependent origination. And I meet your questions, your inquiry as close as I can to how it appears. But there isn't any thinking around it particularly. Maybe a little. Unless I'm talking to Shoto, then I tend to have to think a lot. I'm always waiting for Andy or Sanho to really put me on the spot with their, what do you call those things that happen in courtrooms?
Legalese.
Legalese. Yeah, and if it comes to legalese, if somebody starts pulling out something and pointing to chapter and verse, everything, I'm sunk because I just would have to agree with you.
Cross-examine you today.
I hope you do. I need the intention. I need the is it intention or yeah, I need the intention. No, I need the attention. Cross-examine me. First, we'd have to have a topic though. The fundamental nature of reality.
Sure.
Yeah, gotcha. I won't prepare. Madame, you don't.
I'm gonna ask the question that seemed kind of embedded in Koto's question is, can we be aware while we're thinking without stopping?
Yes. Yes, it's the way it shows up here. It's lack of a personhood in the thinking area. A little bit, but not much. I know that this is my voice, but there's no, but at the my, or where's that coming from? It's just situational. You need to say something, so might as well say my. That might be where the language situation would be supportive of the self-centeredness. But it.
You know, will we know if we're aware while we're thinking?
Somewhat. Awareness is there, but there's no the grasping at a self who knows, a self who is right or a self who is wrong. The grasping goes away. You might still feel like you just said a bunch of things that were untrue because you had this happen to me. I get the sutras mixed up, and sometimes I think I'm quoting Shantideva, and actually I'm quoting Nagarjuna, and then people love to correct you if you do that. Oh no, I don't think that's not my construe right here. I've had that not happen a few times. So, so I'm not very accurate in that area if I'm get pushed. But noticing that it isn't like somebody feels horrible or feels put upon or suddenly feel, oh, I feel so stupid. How many times have you heard me say that? Am I stupid? Yeah, probably am quite a bit. But that's not a credential there. You don't get a negative credential for being the person who can't get anything right, or a positive credential. So I got this down. I got this. I know what I'm talking about. That relative confidence. No, it's an absolute confidence because you know you're talking right out of what this is. You don't need a credential. You only need a credential if there's something else. If there's a success and a failure. There cannot be any failure. You all get up and walk out of the room and never come back. I have not failed, nor have you. That polarity, that's what creates such chaos in the world. Won't add to anything. To take a final question, I guess, or just stop. Either way, there is one.
Yeah, Bowie, no question, but the question that Shoto asked about The Dharma is good in the middle, good at the beginning, or good in the middle, good at the beginning, good at the end, came from the Mahaparinirvana Sutra, if I recall correctly.
And you read the Mahaparinirvana Sutra. See how valuable it is when you study? Now that way you know what Chodo's talking about.
That's at least one source that.
That's one source, okay. So, but you have, did you, by studying that sutra, and you gave a couple of talks on that? How many?
I think I studied it for 6 months.
You studied it for 6 months, so six Dharma talks then you gave on that. So in that area there, what did you gather from what you were reading there that was pointing at? Did it elaborate? Was there an elaboration on it?
Very much so. I don't recall the elaboration particularly, but it goes back to the question I think that Pinyara asked, is everything is sacred?
Yes. So it looks good in the middle. Good at the end. Good at the beginning. Yeah. Great perfection. Okay, I guess we can do what we do next.
May the merit of this penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Jiro san chi shifu, chi son bu sa moko sa, moko the 10 directions, the 3 times, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna Paramita.
O Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect Sokokoji Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.